She was grounded for 18 months. Benched. Told she was too dangerous to fly. But when an F-18 pilot screamed Mayday and started spinning toward the ground, command had only one demand. They needed her call sign. The woman they had benched. Viper Queen was the only one who could save him. It was a Monday. 2:47 in the afternoon. March 9, 2020. 42,000 feet above the Nevada desert. The sky was clear and blue, and far below, the dry brown earth stretched out in every direction without a single cloud to break the view. But up here, high above all of it, something was going very wrong. Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been flying his F-18 Super Hornet for 6 years. He had handled bad weather, equipment failures, and close calls in the air. He knew how to stay calm when things went wrong. But what was happening right now was something he had never trained for, something no one had ever really prepared him for, because the manual said it simply did not happen like this. The fuel system had failed. Jet fuel was spraying directly into the engine intake. The aircraft was shaking so hard that Morrison could barely read his instruments. His flight controls were not responding the way they should. The aircraft was not listening to him anymore. It had a mind of its own, and that mind wanted to fall out of the sky. He grabbed his radio with trembling hands and pressed the button. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday," he said, his voice cracking, Viper 1 declaring emergency, catastrophic fuel system failure, hydraulics degraded, I am losing control, 30 miles from Nellis, I need. And then the transmission ended. Not because he stopped talking. But because the aircraft entered an uncontrolled spin, and the force of it hit him like a truck. The F-18 began tumbling end over end at 400 knots, and the G-forces slammed into Morrison's chest like a giant hand pressing him down into his seat. His vision went dark around the edges. His arms felt like they were made of stone. He could not reach the controls properly. He could not do anything. 42,000 feet became 40,000. 40,000 became 38,000. The aircraft was falling fast, spinning and tumbling, and there was nothing Morrison could do about it. In the tower at Nellis Air Force Base, Air Traffic Controller Brandon Lewis had been doing his job for 8 years. He had seen a lot of things. He had handled a lot of emergencies. But he had never watched a radar blip spiral downward like this, like a stone thrown off a cliff, like something that had simply given up on staying in the air. His hands were shaking as he reached for the emergency phone. Before he could finish the alert, a voice came through on the command frequency. It was calm. It was controlled. And it carried the kind of authority that made everyone in the room stop what they were doing and listen. "Nellis Tower, this is Colonel Hart. I am taking command of this emergency. Contact the 555th Fighter Squadron immediately. Tell them I need Captain Cross in the tower. Right now. Tell them to bench whoever they have to bench to get her here. We have 4 minutes before Morrison hits the ground, and Cross is the only person alive who can talk him through this recovery." Brandon's fingers were already moving before Hart finished speaking. He pulled up the personnel database and typed in the name. The record came up. Captain Alexis Cross. Call sign, Viper Queen. Former F-18 instructor. Emergency recovery specialist. Grounded 18 months ago. Reason, classified. Brandon grabbed the phone. He did not know who this woman was. He did not know what she had done or why she had been grounded. But the radar showed Morrison at 38,000 feet and falling fast, and if Captain Cross was not in this tower in the next 3 minutes, they would be sending emergency crews to pick up wreckage instead of a pilot. He dialed the number and started talking the moment someone picked up. 18 months earlier. September 2018. Nellis Air Force Base. The squadron briefing room was quiet except for the sound of papers being turned. Captain Alexis Cross stood at attention in front of the investigation board. She was 29 years old. She had 1,847 flight hours in F-18s. She had a call sign that other pilots said with a kind of respect you could not fake. Viper Queen. It was not a name she had chosen for herself. It was a name that other people had given her, because she had earned it in ways that most pilots only read about. She had saved 3 pilots from unrecoverable spins. 3 times, another pilot had been in the air with everything falling apart around them, and 3 times, Alexis had gotten on the radio and talked them through a recovery that was not supposed to be possible. She had a gift that was very hard to explain. She could feel how aircraft moved through the air. Not just understand it in her head the way you understand something from a textbook. She could feel it. She knew what the plane was doing and what it was about to do, and she knew how to respond even when the response made no logical sense on paper. But today, none of that mattered. Today, she was being grounded. Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Burke sat across from her. He was 52 years old, a career pilot, a man who had built his life around the idea that the rules existed for a reason and that following them was what kept people alive. He had a file open in front of him, and he was not happy. "Captain Cross," he said, "this board has reviewed the incident from March 14th. Your decision to divert from the training exercise and pursue an unauthorized intercept of what you believed was a hostile aircraft. Sir, the radar signature was consistent with a commercial airliner that was exactly where it was supposed to be. You broke formation. You disobeyed direct orders. You nearly caused an international incident." Alexis felt her jaw tighten. She kept her voice level. "I made a judgment call based on the information I had. A wrong judgment call. And it was not your first." Burke pulled out another report. January. You abandoned your wingman during a training exercise because you thought you saw a civilian aircraft in distress. It was in distress. I confirmed it. After leaving your assigned position. After breaking protocol. Again. He closed the file. "Captain Cross, you are one of the finest instinctive pilots I have ever seen. Your recovery skills are unmatched. But you have a pattern of making unauthorized decisions. Of trusting your gut over orders. And in military aviation, that is dangerous. Sir, those instincts have saved lives. And they have also nearly cost lives. The board's decision is final. You are grounded from flight status pending psychological evaluation and retraining. Effective immediately." Alexis went cold inside. The words hit her like ice water. "You are benching me." "We are protecting you," Burke said. "And everyone else in the air. When you can follow orders as well as you fly, you will be reinstated." "How long?" Burke looked at her without any expression. "As long as it takes." That was 18 months ago. 18 months of sitting in an office. 18 months of reviewing training videos and writing reports and watching other pilots walk out to the flight line while she stayed behind. Her hands had started shaking sometimes when she watched the F-18s take off. Not from fear. From something harder to name. Muscle memory with nowhere to go. A body that knew how to fly but had nowhere to fly to. She had been benched for making unauthorized decisions. For trusting her instincts over protocol. For being right in ways that made her commanders uncomfortable. And for 18 months, she had sat with the question of whether they were right about her. Whether she really was dangerous. Whether the thing that made her different was actually a flaw. She was still sitting with that question on the morning of March 9, 2020, when the phone rang. She had been in the squadron admin building, sitting at her desk, reviewing a training manual that she had already read 4 times. The call was short. "Captain Cross, Colonel Hart needs you in the tower. Emergency. Right now." She was out the door before the caller finished the sentence. She ran across the flight line. 18 months of desk duty had not taken away her physical conditioning. She had made sure of that. She still ran every morning, still did her workouts, still kept herself ready for something she was not sure would ever come. Now it had come, and she ran like her life depended on it, because someone else's life actually did. She came through the tower door breathing hard. The room was tense. Everyone was watching the radar screens. Colonel Marcus' heart turned when she came in. He was 56 years old, graying at the temples, the kind of man who had seen everything and been rattled by very little. But right now he looked rattled. Cross. Thank God. We have an F-18 in an uncontrolled spin. Pilot is Lieutenant Morrison. He is at 32,000 feet and falling. Fuel system failure led to engine fire, hydraulics degraded, aircraft is tumbling. You have maybe 3 minutes before he is too low to recover. Alexis did not pause. Her training took over the moment Hart finished speaking. Where is he now? Brandon pointed at the radar without looking away from it. 28,000 feet. Descent rate is accelerating. Is he conscious? Unknown. He is not responding to radio calls. Alexis reached for the radio headset. What frequency? Emergency guard. But there is no response. Because he is pulling G-forces he cannot fight, she said, her voice completely calm. In a spin that violent, he cannot reach the controls properly. I need to wait until he passes through a moment where the G-forces drop slightly. It happens in a cycle. I need to time it. Hart stared at her. How do you know that? Because I have talked 2 pilots through this exact type of spin. I know the pattern. The tumbling creates oscillating G-forces. They peak and they drop in a cycle. He will have a window of about 2 seconds where he can respond. I need to time my call for that exact moment. She watched the radar. She closed her eyes for just a second, feeling the spin in her mind, calculating the rotation speed from the rate of descent, working out the timing the way someone else might work out a math problem. Then she opened her eyes. Now, she said. Key the mic now. Brandon hit the button. Alexis spoke. Viper 1, this is Viper Queen. I know you cannot reach the stick right now. But in 5 seconds, you will rotate through a point where the forces ease slightly. When you feel that release, key your mic twice. Do not try to talk. Just 2 clicks. Let me know you are alive. Silence. The radar showed Morrison at 25,000 feet. Hart whispered, Cross, if this does not work. It will work. Wait. 10 seconds. 15 seconds. The descent rate did not change. The radar showed 24,000 feet, then 23. Then. 2 clicks. Clear as anything. Alexis breathed out slowly. He was conscious. He could respond. That changed everything. Good, she said into the mic, good. You are alive and I have you. Now I am going to tell you exactly what to do and when to do it, and if you trust me, we are going to get you out of this. Acknowledge with 2 clicks. Click. Click. Alexis turned to Brandon. Give me his altitude every 15 seconds. She had learned this at Edwards Air Force Base, for years before the day they grounded her. She was 25 at the time, already an experienced F-18 pilot with more instinct than most pilots twice her age. She had volunteered for the experimental spin recovery program when most other pilots were not touching it with a long pole. Too risky. Too unpredictable. Too far outside the normal training envelope. But Alexis had always been drawn to the edge cases. To the moments where the aircraft became something strange and dangerous and hard to understand. She wanted to know what lived out there beyond the edge of the manuals. Her instructor had been Colonel Sarah Mendez. A legendary test pilot with a calm face and eyes that missed nothing. On the 3rd day of the program, Mendez had taken Alexis aside after a training session. Cross, you have a gift, Mendez said. You feel how aircraft move. Most pilots fly by the numbers. You fly by something that is harder to teach. That is rare. Is that good or bad? Alexis asked. Both, Mendez said. Good because you can save aircraft that others would lose. Bad because that feeling sometimes contradicts protocol. And protocol exists for a reason. What if protocol is wrong? Mendez smiled at her. It was a small smile, the kind that held a lot of history. Then you had better be right. Because if you are wrong, people die. And if you are right but you broke the rules to get there, they will still come after you for it. That is the world you are working in. Alexis had spent 6 months in that program. She learned the physics of uncontrolled spins the way a musician learns a difficult piece of music, not just the notes but the feeling underneath them. She learned the oscillating G-force pattern. She learned to predict the windows. She learned that there were things you could do inside a spin that the manuals said were impossible, and she learned why they were possible, and she practiced them until they were part of her body the same way breathing was part of her body. She learned that sometimes you had to ignore what the instruments said. That sometimes the instruments were giving you accurate numbers that told you the wrong story. That sometimes the most important information was not in the cockpit at all. It was in the pressure you felt in your chest, the sound of the airframe, the vibration in the controls. You had to feel the aircraft and trust that feeling even when everything else told you that you were wrong. That was what made her extraordinary. That was also, she understood now, what had made Burke uncomfortable enough to ground her. 20,000 feet, Brandon said. Alexis keyed the mic. Viper 1, listen carefully. You are in a flat spin. Nose over tail rotation. Your instruments are giving you numbers right now, but those numbers are not telling you the full story. Do not look at them. Listen to my voice and do exactly what I say, in exactly the order I say it. In approximately 8 seconds, you will rotate through another window. 2 seconds of reduced force. When I say now, you are going to do 3 things at the same time. Full right rudder. Stick forward. Throttle to idle. Push forward. Not back. Forward. I know that feels wrong. It is the right thing to do. Trust me. Acknowledge with 2 clicks. Click. Click. Hart was beside her now. He spoke quietly, just to her. Cross, if your timing is off. She did not look at him. My timing is not off. She counted. Not out loud. In her head. Feeling the spin. Knowing where the aircraft was in its rotation. 8. 7. 6. The math was in her bones. 3, she said aloud. 2. 1. Now. In the cockpit of the tumbling F-18, Morrison's hands moved on pure trust. He had never met this woman. He did not know her name or her history or why she had been benched or what she was doing in that tower. He only knew that her voice was the calmest thing he had ever heard in his life, and that his aircraft was killing him, and that he had no better options. Full right rudder. Stick forward. Throttle idle. The F-18 shuddered. A sound ran through the airframe like a giant hand slapping the side of a bell. The rotation began to slow. Not stop. But slow. The tumbling was losing its rhythm. The spin was coming apart. It is working, Brandon said, his voice tight. The rotation is decreasing. 18,000 feet, he added a moment later. Still falling, but the spin is breaking up. Alexis did not relax. She knew this was only the beginning. Viper 1, you are slowing the rotation. Good. But you are still losing altitude fast. When the spin stops completely, the aircraft will feel different. Heavy. Like it is hanging in the air. That is your signal. When you feel that, I want you to pull back on the stick. Slowly. Not hard. Ease it back like you are afraid to break something. You will have 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, the altitude margin will be gone. Acknowledge. Click. Click. 15,000 feet, Brandon said. 12,000, he said a moment later. The spin stopped. The radar blip changed character. It was still descending, but it was no longer tumbling. Come on, Morrison, Alexis said under her breath. Pull it back. Easy now. The descent rate began to slow. Slowly at first, and then more noticeably. 8,000 feet, Brandon said. He is recovering. 5,000 feet. Airspeed dropping. Level flight coming. 3,000 feet. He is level. He is in controlled flight. The tower erupted. People were grabbing each other, exhaling, saying things that did not quite make sense because the relief was too big for words. Alexis held on to the console with both hands and kept her voice steady. Morrison's voice came over the radio, shaking badly. Viper Queen. I am level. I am flying. I am alive. Copy that, Viper 1, she said. Good work. But we are not done yet. Let us get you on the ground. And then his voice came back, and it had something new in it alongside the relief. I have a problem. Hydraulics are at 20%. Flight controls feel like mud. And my fuel is critically low. Maybe 3 minutes. Alexis looked at Hart. Where is the nearest runway? Nellis. Runway 21. 8 miles northeast. Can he make it? If he flies it perfectly. With degraded controls and no fuel margin, there is almost no room for error. She nodded once and keyed the mic. Viper 1, turn heading 045. Nellis is 8 miles. You have enough fuel if you fly direct and land on the first attempt. There is no go around. One shot. Confirm heading. Confirmed. Heading 045. How are your controls feeling right now? Sluggish. Delayed. Like flying through something thick. That is 20% hydraulics. The controls will respond, but they will respond late. You need to make your inputs before you think you need to make them. The aircraft is behind you by about 3 seconds. Anticipate everything. Understand? Understood. Alexis turned to Brandon. Alert emergency services. Full response. Fire, medical, everything. This landing is going to be hard. She went back to the mic. Viper 1, I am going to walk you through every step of this approach. You do exactly what I say exactly when I say it. No improvising. No second guessing. Just follow my voice all the way down. Copy that, Queen. You are 8 miles out. 3,000 feet. Begin descent now. Target 300 feet per minute. Beginning descent. Seconds passed. She watched the radar with steady eyes. You are descending too fast. 500 feet per minute. Apply light back pressure on the stick now, before you need it. Applying. Good. Descent rate correcting. You are at 2,500 feet. 6 miles out. Looking at your speed now, you are a little fast. Reduce throttle 5%. Reducing. Fuel warning light just came on, Morrison said, and there was a new edge in his voice now. I am running on fumes. Hart looked at her. She could see what he was thinking. He did not say it. She did anyway. He will make it. Viper 1, fuel warning means roughly 90 seconds. You are 6 miles out. We are going to increase your speed slightly to shorten the time in the air. Increase throttle 10%. If I increase throttle, I burn faster. You will reach the runway before you flame out. The extra fuel burn is worth the faster arrival. Trust me. Increase throttle. A short silence. Then, increasing throttle. Good. You are now 4 miles out. 1,800 feet. On glide slope. Doing well. Hydraulics just dropped to 15%. Controls are barely responding. Then we do this differently. Alexis's voice did not waver. I am calling every input from here. You just execute. No thinking required. Just do what I say the moment I say it. Copy. 3 miles. 1,200 feet. Extend landing gear. Gear down. 3 green. Good. 2 miles. 800 feet. You are slightly right of centerline. Turn left 2 degrees. Small correction. Turning. Good. Centerline coming back. 1 mile. 500 feet. Reduce throttle 20%. Reducing. Quarter mile. 200 feet. You are going to touch down in 15 seconds. At 100 feet, you are going to flare. Pull back on the stick gently. If the controls are slow to respond, do not panic. Hold the input and wait for it. The aircraft will settle. Standing by for flare. Brandon had binoculars now. He was watching through the window. I can see him. He is lined up. Coming in a little fast. Viper 1, 150 feet. Speed is high but within limits. Hold your line. 100 feet. Flare now. Gentle back pressure. Flaring. Controls are not. Hold the input. Let it come. The F-18 hit the runway. It was not a gentle touchdown. It was a hard, solid impact, the kind that tests every weld and bolt in the landing gear. The gear compressed fully and the aircraft bounced back up, and for one terrible second it looked like it might go sideways. But it came back down, both main gear touching together, and Morrison deployed the drag chute and the big orange canopy blossomed out behind the aircraft and the fighter jet started slowing, rolling down the runway, using up the pavement but not running out of it. Both engines flamed out with 1,500 feet of runway still ahead. The fuel was gone. But the aircraft was on the ground, rolling, decelerating, coasting to a stop with the drag chute still deployed behind it. Morrison's voice came over the radio one more time. It was barely a whisper. I am down. I am stopped. I am alive. The tower went completely loud. People were cheering, clapping, saying his name, saying her name. Hart put his hand on Alexis's shoulder and she felt her legs go slightly weak for just a moment, the way your body sometimes waits until the crisis is over to tell you how afraid it was. You just saved his life, Hart said. She nodded. She did not say anything. Because she was already thinking about what came next. 3 hours later, she was sitting across from Colonel Hart and Lieutenant Colonel Burke in Hart's office. Burke's face was not readable. It had the quality of a door that is closed all the way and locked. Hart spoke first. Captain Cross, what you did today was extraordinary. Lieutenant Morrison is alive because of your skills and your knowledge. Thank you, sir. Burke leaned forward. It was also completely unauthorized. You were grounded. You had no authority to direct flight operations. Alexis met his eyes. Colonel Hart ordered me to the tower. I followed orders. And then you made decisions that could have killed Morrison if your timing was wrong by even 1 second. But my timing was not wrong. That is not the point. Burke's voice rose slightly. He controlled it quickly, but the edge was there. The point is that you did exactly what you were benched for 18 months ago. You made instinctive calls that contradicted standard procedure. You told Morrison to ignore his instruments. To ignore what his training was telling him. That is not how we operate. Standard procedure would have killed him, Alexis said. The spin he was in is listed in the manual as unrecoverable. It is listed that way because the manual assumes ejection is the only option. But Morrison did not have time to eject safely. The spin was too violent. So I use techniques that are not in any manual because those techniques are not supposed to exist. But they do exist, because I spent 6 months learning them. And today they saved a life. You guessed, Burke said. I knew, she said. The silence in the room was heavy. Hart broke it. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried. Colonel Burke, I stood in that tower and I watched Captain Cross work for 20 minutes. She did not guess. She calculated every input, every timing window, every response. She understood what that aircraft was doing in ways that I have genuinely never seen before. That is not recklessness. That is mastery of a very rare kind. Burke stood up. Mastery that ignores the command structure. Mastery that makes her unreliable. Mastery that saved a pilot's life. This time. What about the next time, when the instinct is wrong? Alexis stood. She kept her voice controlled. Sir, you grounded me because I make decisions that are not in the procedure manual. Because I trust what I know over what I am told. I have spent 18 months questioning whether you were right. Whether I was the problem. Today answered that question for me. Sometimes the procedure is not enough. Sometimes you need someone who can see past the manual and find the answer that the manual does not contain. That is what I do. You can call it dangerous if you want. But you cannot call it wrong. Burke looked at her for a long time. And when you are wrong? Then I own it, she said. Completely. But sitting in an office while someone dies because I was afraid to act, that is not something I am able to do. Court-martial me if you want. But I saved Morrison. And if I had to do it again tomorrow, I would. The room was very quiet. Hart spoke again. His voice was calm and final. Colonel Burke, I am recommending that Captain Cross be reinstated to full flight status immediately. I am also recommending that she be assigned as the primary emergency recovery instructor for this entire fighter wing. What she knows is not just skill. It is knowledge that should be in the curriculum. Protocol needs to be updated based on her experience, and she is the only person who can do that. Burke turned to look at him. You are overruling my decision from 18 months ago. I am correcting an 18-month mistake, Hart said. Cross is not the problem. The problem is that we do not have procedures for the things she knows how to do. Instead of removing her from the Air Force, we should have been learning from her. That changes today. Burke looked at Alexis one more time. The expression on his face was complicated. It was the expression of a man who believed in the system he had built his life around, looking at evidence that the system had been wrong. If I reinstate her, he said finally, she answers directly to me. Any unauthorized decision, any protocol violation, and she is done permanently. Agreed, Hart said. Burke looked at Alexis. Captain Cross, you are reinstated. You are on the shortest leash in Air Force history. Understand? Yes, sir, she said. Thank you, sir. He left without another word. Hart looked at her. He was almost smiling. Welcome back, Viper Queen. The next morning, Alexis walked down the hallway of the Nellis Medical Center. Morrison's room was at the end of the hall. She could hear the sound of the base outside through the walls, the distant sound of jet engines, the sound of the world she had been kept away from for a year and a half. She pushed open the door. Morrison was in the bed, sitting up slightly. He had bruises on his face and neck from the G-forces. His left arm was in a sling. But his eyes were clear, and when he saw her, he sat up a little straighter. You are Viper Queen, he said. I am Alexis, she said. Captain Alexis Cross. I owe you my life. She sat down in the chair beside his bed. You saved yourself. You executed every instruction exactly right. Because you told me what to do, he said. I was dead in that spin. I was blacking out. I had stopped fighting because there was nothing left to fight with. And then I heard your voice. You sounded so calm. Like you had done it 1,000 times before. Like you knew exactly how it was going to end. I have done it 3 times before, she said. You were number 4. He looked at her. 4 pilots. You have pulled 4 pilots out of unrecoverable spins. That is what the manual calls them. I prefer to think of them as spins that required a different approach. He was quiet for a moment. They told me you were benched. That you had been grounded for 18 months. That is true. For making the kind of decisions you made yesterday. Also true. He shook his head slowly. And now you are back. On a very short leash, she said. But yes. Back. He extended his right hand. She shook it. His grip was firm despite everything his body had been through in the last 24 hours. Thank you, Captain Cross, he said. For not giving up on me. For trusting yourself when every rule said you should not have been in that tower at all. Thank you for trusting me, she said. That took courage too. Following the instructions of a voice you had never heard before, doing things that felt wrong, when your life was on the line. That is not a small thing. How did you know it would work, he asked. How did you know the timing was right? How do you know any of it? She thought about it before she answered. I did not know with total certainty. Nobody can know that. But I know how aircraft behave at the edges of what they are designed to do. I know where the windows are in a spin. I know the physics of the recovery. And I know that aircraft are built to fly. Even a tumbling F-18 has moments where it wants to be stable. You just have to find those moments and use them. I have spent years learning to find them. And they grounded you for it. She smiled. It was a small smile, honest and not bitter. They grounded me for making decisions that did not fit the procedure. For trusting something that could not be written in a manual. And for 18 months, I wondered if they were right. Today I stopped wondering. 6 months after the day Morrison's F-18 spiraled over the Nevada desert, Captain Alexis Cross stood at the front of a classroom at Nellis Air Force Base. There were 50 F-18 pilots in the room. Some of them were younger than she was. Some of them had more flight hours. All of them were watching her with the full attention of people who knew they were about to learn something that could save their lives. She had designed this course herself. Advanced Emergency Recovery Procedures. It covered the things that did not appear in standard training. The edge cases. The scenarios the manuals classified as hopeless. She had spent 3 months writing the curriculum, working with Hart's team to update official procedures based on what she knew, building something that would outlast her. She pulled up a video on the screen at the front of the room. Radar footage. The tight spiral of Morrison's descent over the desert, the blip dropping, and then slowing, and then leveling out. This is an unrecoverable spin, she said. According to the manual. According to official procedure, Lieutenant Morrison should have ejected. The spin was categorized as unsurvivable through controlled recovery. But he did not have time to eject. So we did something else. We used techniques that are not in any manual and we brought him home. She paused and looked around the room. Some of you are wondering if this is reckless. If I am standing here telling you to ignore procedure and trust your gut. I am not telling you that. Procedure is not the enemy. Procedure is the foundation. It keeps you alive in every normal situation, and most of your career will be normal situations. Follow the procedure. Know it completely. Make it part of you. But here is what I also need you to know. There will come a day for some of you when you are out of normal situations. When the aircraft is doing something the manual says is impossible. When the procedure ends and there is nothing left to follow. On that day, you cannot freeze. You cannot wait for instructions that do not exist. You have to think. You have to feel. You have to trust yourself and your training and make a decision in the space where the rules run out. A young pilot in the second row raised his hand. Captain Cross, how do you know when you are in that space? How do you know when to stop following procedure and start trusting instinct? She looked at him. He could not have been more than 24 years old. He had the face of someone who wanted to do everything right. You will know, she said. Not before the moment. But in it. The moment will tell you. What I can teach you is how to be ready for it. How to recognize it when it comes. How to have the tools ready so that when procedure ends, you are not empty-handed. Is that not still dangerous? He asked. Yes, she said simply. But you know what is more dangerous? A pilot who watches someone die because he was afraid to do the thing that was not in the book. A pilot who follows every rule perfectly while the situation demands something that no rule has ever covered. That pilot is the most dangerous person in the air. She looked around the room again. 50 faces. 50 futures. I was grounded for 18 months because I made decisions that scared my commanders. Because I trusted what I knew when the procedure said to do something different. And for 18 months, I sat at a desk and I wondered if I was the problem. Then a pilot's F-18 started tumbling over the Nevada desert, and I got a phone call, and I found out the answer. I was not the problem. The gap in the training was the problem. And we are here today to close that gap. The room was completely quiet. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then the person next to him. Then everyone, all 50 of them, standing up, applauding, not as a performance but because they understood. Because they knew what it had cost her. Because they knew what she had come through to be standing in front of them right now. Alexis Cross looked at them and thought about Morrison's voice on the radio, barely a whisper, saying he was alive. She thought about 18 months of watching other people fly while her hands shook at her desk. She thought about Burke telling her she was grounded for as long as it takes, and Hart telling her she was back, and the young pilot asking her how you know when the rules run out. She thought about what Mendez had told her, years ago at Edwards. If you are right, they will still come after you. That is the world you are working in. Yes. But here was also the world she was working in. 50 pilots, learning what she knew, carrying it forward. Morrison, alive and recovering, with his whole career still ahead of him. A curriculum that would outlast her, built from everything she had spent years learning in the places where the manuals went silent. They had benched her for being different. For seeing things others could not see. For trusting herself when the institution said she was wrong. And then one day, when the emergency was real and the clock was running, they had needed exactly what made her different. They had needed her. In 18 seconds, everything they had spent 18 months punishing her for had become the only thing that mattered. Sometimes being right is worth the wait. She walked toward the flight line after the class ended, her flight suit on, the smell of jet fuel and dry Nevada air mixing together the way it always had. She stopped at the edge of the tarmac and looked at the F-18 waiting for her. Her aircraft. Her sky. She climbed up the ladder and settled into the cockpit and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The canopy came down. The engine started. She felt the rumble move through her bones like something coming home. The afterburners lit, and the aircraft rolled, and then it was no longer rolling because it was flying, lifting off the desert floor, climbing into the Nevada sky, going up and up until the ground below was just a pattern of brown and gray and the sky ahead was everything. Viper Queen was back in the air.